Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia and welcome back to another episode of Theorycraft Thursday. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Theorycraft Thursday is a weekly series for the upcoming collectible card game Total War Elysium, where I'll be diving into certain gameplay or design topics. And this week, since there's no major changes after the recent big November patch update, we'll just be doing an overview of shatter cards in the game, as there's a few pretty good shatter cards that got added in along with the last patch. And one of them is the Doom Rearguard, which is a 1/4 unit that will spawn a short sword. So, Shatter obviously has been in the game for a while, but how many cards are actually in the game with Shatter effect? Well, there's a total of 15 of them, and here they are listed by their supply cost. And it ranges from Doom Rearguard, which we just showcased, all the way to legendary cards like the Wild Geese, or some very powerful late game card like the Huskarls. And if we reorder these cards by their era or by their faction type, we end up with something like this. And we can see more clearly the distribution of the shatter cards in the game, starting with the Headhunter being the only timeless shatter card that's available to all generals in the game. It's gone through a few changes. The current iteration on this patch is a 4-cost 2/4 unit that will deal its damage, as in its attack power, to the enemy general when you die. So in theory, this is a pretty powerful card, because you do get a body that's very hard to remove, being that it has 4 health, and even if the enemy can remove this, you're guaranteed to deal 2 damage to the enemy general. So methods for you to buff this card's attack, or methods for the enemy to nerf this card's attack, whether you can do something like lay down arms, are all very beneficial to neutralize its shatter effect, or else you really have no tool to really deal with it. Then moving on, the Ancient Era only has access to 1 shatter card as well, but it happens to be a very powerful one in the Dread Harbinger, which was added in about 2 patches ago. And this is a pretty simple card, 3 cost, 2/3 body, so the stat's a little bit low. But the wonderful effect here is that you're able to spawn a legendary card, the Dread Host, which is a 6 cost 10/10 unit, into your reserve. So by taking the Dread Harbinger, which is a common card, so you can take this every day, you essentially have unlimited access to a very powerful mid-game and late-game legendary unit at all times, because you're able to take this every day, like I said, whereas most legendary card, you only can have 1 copy in your deck, and once you use it, it's gone. So very powerful, but once again, Ancient Era only has access to this. Then moving a little bit forward, because we have a large amount of medieval cards, we're going to talk about them a little later, we're going to jump to the Empire Era, and there are 2 cards in the Privateers and the Wild Geese. And both of these cards were altered or introduced during a time when hand decks, or decks that want to maintain high hand count, was kind of introduced into the meta with Devol's release. And Privateer does that by giving you a unit that's perfectly statted, 4 cost 4/4, and gives you the shatter effect of adding a supply catch to your hand, or essentially making this card hand size neutral, because you will play this and eventually you get a card back, and the supply catch is useful for other combos as well. Whereas the Wild Geese also changed from previous iterations to this 7 cost 3/3, so the stat's super low for the cost, and it's a legendary card. But the whole purpose of this card is to get itself killed so that you can fill your hands with round shots and supply catches. So at the maximum, you can get 11 cards from this, right? Because you have a max hand size of 12. And from the 12 cards, your signature card will always count as 1. So you have 11 empty slots that you can get random amounts of round shots and supply catches. So if you break that down about half, the max damage you can expect here is about 6 damage from those round shots. So that's not terribly bad, especially since you're getting the supply catches to play those for free at the same time. So essentially you're paying 7 for 3/3 and about 6 ping damage, or maybe 5 ping damage to whatever target you would like, and giving you about 10 to 11 event cards in case you're running some sort of scribe combo deck. That way you can draw a lot of cards, get a lot of supplies back. So there are uses for this, but of course this is definitely a very weak static card, and it being legendary means not many players will have access to this. Then we have this huge block of cards in the middle that are from the medieval era, and there are 5 of them, and they make up the bulk of the Shatter card. 1/3 of the Shatter card belong to the Medieval era, and if you look down below, you also see there are 3 Viking Shatter card. So over half of the Shatter cards belong to the Viking decks, because right now in the Medieval era, we only have Viking decks. And we can see that some of these effects vary quite a bit. So you have Doom Rearguard, we already mentioned, spawns a unit. Warmongers punishes you by forcing you to shuffle your entire hand into your deck. This has gotten a little bit interesting recently because previously you want to use early pressure and Lagatha deck with this and you don't mind losing your hand as long as you don't lose too many cards. Now there is a couple card effects in the Medieval era that features late game power spikes when your hand are empty, whether that's draw 3 cards with one of the latest ships or Berserker card, which becomes unbreakable if your hand is empty. So perhaps Warmonger can be utilized in unique ways in those decks. Then we have Forlorn Hope. This has no real shatter effect, but it does have the shatter keyword. It has a herald effect, and it will trigger all shatter effects of all other allies in this line. But this card itself does not have a shatter effect, but whenever you do play it, you can trigger some shatter effects on the line itself. And then you have another legendary card here, the Great Horde. Very fairly static card, but extra value because when it dies, you get 3 short sword. So you're paying 6 for 6/6, and when it dies, 3/2/2. So the stat works out beautifully. Very high value card. And then speaking of high value card, you have Army of the Great Banner. It's a 4/6 card with Herald, Daybreak, and Shatter, and all 3 effect triggers by spawning a new pikeman, which are 1/5 units. And this is really for a counterattack deck usually, because you have a bunch of high health, low attack units that you can trigger with counterattack to make them all 5/5 pikemen. That's really powerful, but it does take a while to get going as this is a 7 cost card, so you're going to have some other way to survive the early game. Then we're going to jump to the individual factions, and they are the Trojan, the Viking, and the French Republic. No other faction actually have any shatter card. So 3 Kingdom, no shatter card. And we have Mycenaean Chariot starting things off. This used to be a beast of a card, being 3/3, 5 costs. Heroic and Shatter summons 2 archers. Now it's 2/3. I think it's still really strong just because the number of bodies you get from this card. Essentially, when you play it, if you can trigger Heroic, which hopefully you can in the backline, let's say for example, you get 3 bodies right away. 2/3, 1/2, 1/2 with long range on the 2/1/2, flanking on the 2/3. And then even if they can wipe out that entire line, you end up with another 2/1/2, 1/2 with long range. And if you're playing this in decks like Penthelia, which we'll talk about a little bit later, it becomes even more powerful as you just have this endless supply of bodies that the enemy have no way of really removing. And the Centaur Horde plays in a similar fashion, being a 2/7 unit, which means it's actually really hard to get the Centaur Horde killed. But if you're playing with Penthelia, which is a wonderful Greek general for Shatter decks, you can use her signature card of Blood Oath to resummon your unit after they die with 1 health, and then this becomes a 2/1, very easy to die, and the main hope here is to summon additional units when you actually die. So the Shatter effect here is deploy 2 Normat Cavalries with attack equal to this. So in essence here, you're just really trying to get a numbers advantage with both the Mycenaean Chariot and the Centaur Horde. Mycenaean Chariot gets more love because you get a variety of units, as in you get some long range units, you get some flanking cavalry units, and you can essentially summon 5 with 1 Mycenaean Chariot play. 2 on the Heroic, 2 on the Shattered. Whereas the Centaur Horde plays a little bit differently. Centaur Horde really takes advantage of trying to boost the attack of the Centaur Horde. For example, you can use something like Ferocity to double the attack, or other means to boost the attack of Centaur Horde to make sure when you do die, all your new Normat Cavalry spawns a bit stronger because they're typically just 2/2. So these are used for Penthelia decks. And then you have 3 Viking cards, Marauder, Longship, Huscarl. Marauders got the most change recently. It used to not have a Shatter effect, used to just have a Herald effect. Now you get additional supply on both the Herald and the Shatter, but it lost raid. So it's still a decent card, especially if you're playing more Temple than Aggro. So I would say this is still pretty good since you do get fair value for 2 costs, get a 2/2 body. If you're trying to force this on a Lagatha deck where you try to empty your hand, it's not going to work as well as before, because essentially it was giving you a body plus an extra supply catch when you played it. Now that's no longer the case. Longship has always been very good in most Viking decks because you do get the extra draw on the Shatter effect, and drawing cards obviously have great value in all types of card games, including this one. And you have a 4-cost 3/2. The cost is definitely a bit high, but because it has raid, you're often playing this for 2 or even less. And then finally, Huskarl here is an 8-cost late game unit, 10/7, beefy stats, and you get a shield when you play it. And the Shatter effect gives adjacent ally access to shield as well, which is pretty good if you have this next to your general or other useful cards on the front line. Essentially a very difficult to remove unit, being 10/7, and with an excellent Shatter effect on top of that as well. So this is definitely a good value card. It's epic, not legendary, so you could take this every day, which gives your opponent even more trouble as they have to have a card that can deal with a 10/7 unit every single day. And finally, we have Marshal Nay, which got changed recently to have this Shatter effect of deploying Lancers for each planned card in hand. This is probably the most complicated Shatter effect in the game, but essentially you want to have this in a planned deck, maybe Devol nowadays, since he does stack up a bunch of cards and his signature card also has plan on it. And the whole idea here is you would send out Marshal Nay, have him get killed, and then you end up with a bunch of 6/3 Lancers, and you just punish the enemy with your flanking on the turn right after. So pretty interesting cards. And if we extend our conversation away from just playable cards, we also should talk about these two generals here in Penthesilea and Ragnar, which are both designed to feature a lot of Shattered, as both of their signature card, Blood Oath and Avenge, gives units Shatter ability. So this can be on unit that currently has Shatter ability to stack both of them, or on unit that does not have Shattered, and you can gift them the Shatter effect. Blood Oath is redeploy the unit with 1 health. Quite powerful on units with access to camouflage or unit with access to fast, as you can essentially trigger 2 attacks out of them with this Blood Oath. It does cost quite a bit at 5, so that is kind of holding it back. But I think that's a fair cost, because if you make this any lower, there's going to be a ton of very punishing combos. And even right now, I still think Penthesilea is very respectable, especially after she got the 2 attack. Now the 18 health does hurt a bit, because Ragnar here has 220, and even then, it's a bit difficult to play since he does attack his own allies during end of day. Now, his Avenge is going to be a little bit easier to use than Blood Oath and more consistent, and you can target anyone you want because the effect is very simple. You deploy a Skeed, which is a 2/2 ship unit that you can use to synchronize with other ship cards in your deck, and it being cost 3 means you can play this a lot more freely and more opportunities to play this in the late game, because you essentially continue to extend your board by giving this out every single turn in the late game, because you can afford to do so once you do have more supplies. And even in the early games, you can do this on day 1 to maintain some sort of board, even after you suicide attack into your ally during that daybreak. Whereas Blood Oath, you can't play this until day 2 because of the high cost. Then finally, since we did take a look at Penthesilea, we might as well mention that unlike the Vikings, who has access to about 8 cards, if you include Forlorn Hope, which technically does not have Shattered, the Trojan factions actually have similar cards to Forlorn Hope that does not have the Shatter keyword, but has some sort of relationship to Shatter cards. And here we can see the Satyr and the Fall of Troy. So Satyr is a very interesting card where it has really no keyword on itself, but what happens here is that whenever you have a Shatter effect triggered on the board, if Satyr happens to be in your deck, it will just automatically get played. So it's kind of a temple value card. You can keep this in your reserve and start throwing it into your deck past day 2, especially on a deck that doesn't have enough draws. And then you will just play a lot of Shatter cards or have Penthesilea give out Shatter effects, and then once that triggers, all the Satyrs come onto the field, and it's just a value play because you're getting free units and you're reducing the amount of cards that's in your deck so you can draw out cards that you want to draw. And Fall of Troy, we've seen plenty enough. It deploys a Trojan horse. It's this 0/8 unit that's deployed for your enemy with a Shatter effect that will help you play your entire hand out onto the field once the Trojan horse got killed and triggers his Shatter effect. So not too surprised here, and in summation, these 6 cards all are very powerful, thus gives the option for the Trojan factions, namely Penthelia, to play a bit of Shattered deck as well. So Ragnar, Penthelia are kind of the two generals right now, and hopefully we're going to see more Shattered cards and more Shattered mechanic focused generals in the future, as I feel like Shatter is one of the stronger mechanics in the game since it is a delayed effect and it's hard for the enemy to punish you because you have two phases to deal with. The unit itself that has the Shattered and whatever this unit does afterward. So this is going to be it for our episode of Theorycraft Thursday. It's a very calm, easy episode as we don't have much to talk about this week. Hopefully we'll see some balance changes next week as the new patch had a couple weeks to process and we're about to enter the December season, so hopefully we'll be able to see a December patch with some new cards as well. So until then, bye!